Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Vagrant Queen. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we got to our first true introduction to Winnie Bot, who is the bot they picked up last episode, with Winnie B going forward, but still, it's pretty dope to see, like, hey, you got an ally, but it's like, I can't do a lot because there's a lot of issues I'm wrong with, but it's like, we'll kind of figure that out later on, and I love that immediately comes up in this episode of like, yeah, I should have kind of done a lot of that some of that stuff ahead of time, but regardless. I love that they're basically at a convenience. They're at a gas station store, and it's so interesting because of May. I think she's very like self-conscious and stuff like that because she's like, "Oh, I know what you're thinking. That I'm kind of like I forgot what she was going on, but basically the dude that was pumping the gas. She's like, I know what you're thinking. Like that I kind of what am I doing out here and doing all this? But it's just like, and he's just like not thinking any of that. But I think she's just kind of taking her own doubts and kind of throwing it back at herself, pretending like it's coming from someone else. But I love that they're in the convenience store, and essentially they have what is essentially, I guess, space slushies, which is interesting, and it just tastes like, which is I guess like anywhere could have it, but I'm like, part of me wonders, is that something that was taken from Earth that ended up in space, or just space just happens to have essentially their version of a slushie. And I love because obviously Alita had really many opportunities of stuff like that, because it's like obviously like her meals are always prepared for her. It's like, and I even love Isaac doing all these motions and stuff, and he's doing a little thing with his fingers, and he's like, this is me playing the world's smallest violin, and they're about to drink more of the slushies, and then like one of the loyalists shoot it out of her hand, which at first I'm like, are you shooting that out of her hand because you don't know if it's poisonous or not? But it's like, no, it was just them having shitty aim, I guess, because they couldn't get her. And then later on, like, I'm sorry, like it's a stun gun and everything, but it turns into like a shootout in the convenience store, which is really interesting. But everyone gets electroshocked, and then it's like, ooh, we're so sorry about that, and then they're also getting some stuff, and like, oh, we're also sorry about all the stuff we did to the store, and the dude who's running the place just kind of looks like whatever. I love that literally there's no dialogue from him or the dude in the gas pump. It's just kind of like nothing, just staring at like, okay, whatever. But nevertheless, it turns out Elita is still a little knocked out from it, because like, dude was like, yeah, we used a little extra charge just because the last time she woke up a little too soon. And I love Isaac punching him in the face, and he's like, I'm sorry, but like, come on, like, he needed to be punched in the face, right? He has such a punchable face, which I'm like, oh, that's super adorable, Isaac doing it, because it's like, Alita could be messed up because of you doing something stupid like that. But it's the whole thing of like, because basically the general is chewing him out, because it's like, you're the one that gave out information about where Alito was. He's like, I didn't betray her. I mean, it's like, well, not directly, it wasn't, his intention. But at the same time, it's like, the fact of the matter is, rather than kind of crapping on me, you should kind of you should look at yourselves. And even Ame was kind of like, yeah, that is true. I mean, you guys kind of had literally screwed the pooch on this whole situation, any attempts. Because even, someone that she knows from her past was like, yeah, this wasn't the way things were supposed to go down. They were supposed to bring her not harmed. I even love Isaac showing off to the lady, and the blue lady being like, yeah, I'm the one that taught Alita everything she knows. Well, he was bragging to that dude, Carl. He's like, oh my God, Carl's like, oh my God, Isaac, you're so cool. You're so amazing. He's like, I know. And then it's like, oh, why don't you show off some of those moves? And he's like, all right. And he testing them out, because he's like, oh, he's showing her karate and stuff like that. Because even at one point he has his fist by his side. I'm like, oh, is that him supposed to be tightening the belt of a gi? Is that what that was supposed to be? I think so. But nevertheless, Alita wakes up and is like, what the hell is going on here? So I even love there's that bit where she was basically telling, like, she's like, no, I can't let her go off on her own. And Ame's like, I can take care of myself. She's like, oh no, I did. It's like, it's fine. And it's like, literally the entire episode, she's talking to Half-Light. Do you think, she brought it up once, and then she was like, never mind. And then she brings it up later on and she's like, do you think I offended her by saying, you know what, never mind. It's like, and it's so sweet, because you can definitely tell that she has a thing for Ame. And I think it's just like the fact that she, with her lifestyle and everything, she kind of has to keep people at a distance. So you never really get too attached to people. But I think for the first time, she found someone that she's really into. And because the whole entire time she was just worried, like, no, I didn't mean that. But do you think she took it this way? And she was like very self-conscious, because it seemed like she's not the type of person to get self-conscious about anything, but she's getting self-conscious about Ame, and it seems like super adorable. But nevertheless, Isaac and Amay are kind of out looking for, stuff for the ship and everything. And I love Home Dude gives them something for like the rodents or the roaches or whatever. But obviously Isaac throws it around because it's like his ears hurt. And even later on, he's like, I thought the dude was just being an asshole, so I didn't pick it out. I thought he was just being a dick again, so I just left it. But them having their one-on-one was really interesting because like the place was kind of very barren, and the fact is that Amay wanted to leave immediately. He was like, wow, you're kind of very uptight. You're even more uptight than like Alita is. And for her, it's like, because this place reminded her of what her planet looked like, just less dead bodies. And he was like, oh, and because basically it's not because necessarily the Republic, there was a war that found its way to her planet. And for her, it's like her and her brother were fortunately able to get. And she tries, like, she seems like, despite depressing stuff, she seems like her defense mechanism is to kind of keep a like happy disposition. So it seems like that's her way to kind of compensate for it. She's like, no, but we survived, so that's good. She's always trying to look at the silver lining to the whole situation. And obviously, we learn a little bit more about Isaac's whole situation. Like, obviously, he's been away from home for 5 years because it turns out like Amay was like 5 years old when all that went down, and it's like that's hard for any child to handle. But then that started getting Isaac thinking, which we now found out like, oh, his wife had a kid, and he's like, I hope that kid took after her brains-wise, looks-wise. He's kind of like, for her sake, I hope the child took nothing from me. But Amay was like, at least hopefully your kid has your sense of humor. I was like, oh, that's so cool. But they're running from the roaches and or just insects. I think they're considered roaches or whatever. The fact of the matter is making a horrible noise and stuff like that. And I love the whole like them like we cut back to them, and he's like, oh, blah blah blah, over the Rough Riders any day. He's like, wait, how do we get into this conversation? It's like, how you met your wife. He's like, oh, right. He's like, yeah. And basically it was at a sports game, and like, but the fact is, he's like, I never looked at the field. All I could do was focus on her. I was like, oh, that's a sweet story. And even Amay was like, oh yeah, I'm surprised that you were able to stay faithful. The fact is, he was kind of like, I mean, yeah. It was like, you slipped up, didn't you? Are we going to find out you have a space baby out there? That's what just crosses my mind. Probably not the case, but part of me wonders, like, do you have a space baby out there? Or is that just kind of being like, oh, well, I just get the feeling like that's supposed to imply that he might not have been as... I mean, at least when it came to Aleda, he was like, oh, I'm married, so it's like, don't even worry about it. So, I mean, it has been 5 years, so... I mean, not saying like it justifies it if he did or anything. I'm just saying, like, who knows? Maybe he did, but it's like, oh no, I'm faithful to my wife. Just that reaction makes me think, no, he wasn't. But not trying to judge, it just seemed like he was covering up for it. We'll see. But Amay kind of makes it clear that she's like kind of not really into settling down just because she loves people. So, obviously they call Winnie B to kind of back them up, and it's like, can you pilot the ship? She's like, yeah, I am capable of that. And stuff like that, like, yeah. And then she's like, if you gave me the firmware update I asked you about last night. And it's like, and once again they do that music cue, and she's like, that's what happens when you procrastinate. But Winnie B is on the way. It's like, I'll help you. And it's like, don't worry, I'm the fastest of my model, and it's going super slow. I was like, I love that just being a thing. And especially like it stops at one point. You're like, will you stop? There's a piece of wood in the way. It has to stop, back up, kind of do like a 3-point turn to get around the log. I love it. I was like, this is amazing. Reminds me of that scene. It's one of my cousin's favorite scenes in Children of Man. It's literally the slowest chase scene you'll ever see, and it seems so weird. If you've seen the movie Children of Man, you know what I mean. It's just like literally a on-foot scene and a car scene at the same. It's a whole thing. It kind of reminded me of that a little bit. But nevertheless, the crossing the plank and everything. He's like, oh, look at you. You're kind of a... Because I love that she kind of messes stuff up. Because obviously he's, talking Earth lingo and stuff like that. Because at first he's like, bingo. And she's like, bingo. I forgot how she said it. He's like, close enough. And in fact, she's like, oh, you did it, MacGyver. And he's like, yeah, close enough. Because he was referencing MacGyver and stuff like that. Because of how, like, she's able to just kind of put stuff together immediately. But I do like when he was, he's like, you know what? I'll take care of this. My middle name is Distraction. And then, May's she's putting her together like, oh, is it? And he's like, my name's not actually Distraction. And he proceeds to go, once again, slow-mos. Yes! I love me some slow-mos, dude. Like I said, I just love that. I like that that's just an aesthetic choice. At least once an episode, we get to just get that freeze frame of just them doing shit. Him hitting those creatures with the car, blasting them at the same time. And it's like, he's having so much fun like a damn rodeo. And he's just like, But luckily, Winnie B shows up, but the ship's already gone. We'll get to that soon enough. But the fact is, it's like Winnie B's like, oh, I can disrupt those things. All I have to do is put out that frequency. Granted, it's going to hurt human ears as well, but because I guess it's just on a frequency that would affect these creatures and humans, but it totally works. And it's like, yeah. And I love that he teaches her to high five, and she's like, why would you do that? It's like, you do it to celebrate. And she does it over and over again, almost like a kid, and they're doing it back and forth. I was like, this is an adorable moment between these two. I love it. But nevertheless, I also, like, once again, that thing of like, yeah, if you had done this, we could have dealt with this situation. For one, because I even love him being like, oh, like, he can't wait to go back to Earth, because, like, producers are going to be fighting tooth and nail to get the rights to his life story. And it's like, oh, what would you do in the adaptation? And he's like, well, I'd make it so I didn't throw away that like, insect thing that the dude gave me. I'd make sure in the adaptation, like, the reenactment of this scene, he'd have kept it. I love that. But also, it turns out Winnie B could have done this from the ship too. Like, if you had told me what creatures it was, I could have sent the sound wave throughout. Would have done it radio wise. I didn't have to come here in person. So it's like, knowing what we know now, we would obviously do things different. Hindsight being 20/20 and everything. But at the same time, Elliot's got the whole situation because she's talking to Hap. And obviously, Hap wants her to kind of take over, like, the queen situation. And obviously for her, she doesn't want to. It's like, she wants to save her mom, and that's kind of it. She doesn't want to be the queen. Because we see later on, because I like that we kind of got a little more explanation on the whole monarchy situation. Because at first it's the whole thing of like, okay, so we see that she's on the throne as a kid, and I'm like, why is your mom on the throne? Why are you specifically on the throne? But then later on, I pieced it all together because they kind of bring it up. It's like, because at first I was like, is that not actually your real mom or something like that? But then they bring up the fact is, like, once again, it's like, right, she's the last of the bloodline. And I'm like, right, her mom isn't the bloodline, her dad is. Like, the bloodline that makes them royal comes from her dad's side of the family, not her mom. So with her dad going, she's literally the last. Even if her mom's still alive, she's still the last one. Her mom is more so like an advisor role, pretty much. She has a special role being the mother to the queen, but that's kind of what it is. She's more an advisory role. She doesn't have any like monarchical power on a monarchy scale, So I think that's kind of interesting. It was an interesting insight, too, to kind of look at the past of, like, obviously her being a little girl on the throne, and obviously she doesn't understand the way a lot of stuff works. So someone came to her to be like, hey, can we do things a little differently? But they kind of turned her away. But even Elliot was kind of like, why don't we do that? But it's like her mom was basically telling her that basically there's no simple situations, because it's like this would have meant like taking people who are mining other stuff, which it's basically almost like almost like a checks and balances, but more so like the structure of the society. Like, basically, the people working on that particular place, those workers mine stuff, and it's like if you take some of those workers off of that so that they could, be in a position where they could kind of farm more food and stuff like that, basically it would mean that other people starve. So it's almost like, it wouldn't be a check and balance, it's more a domino effect of like, you change one thing, it has ramifications for other things. So it's almost like her mom was trying to teach her that there's a perfect balance to everything, which from one perspective you can look at it, it's like, but that's the idealist in you. It's like, but doing one little thing can't, but it's like, you never know what the consequences will be. Like, no matter what you make a choice, there's always going to be consequences no matter what. But it's all about trying to keep that perfect balance of like telling some people no, and obviously that comes, that came with its own complications because of the whole revolt, because some people will look at her as like, oh, she's an ignorant child on the throne. I mean, that's the thing. She didn't ask for the throne, and obviously that's the reason why like people like Lazaro feels the way he does. I mean, I think that's why the revolt happened in the first place, because it's like, why should someone who's not qualified be on the throne just because you're from a certain bloodline? Because she's on a bloodline and we need a monarch because we don't know what happened to her dad. Her dad might have died, maybe an assassination. Maybe it's a thing of, it looks like it was natural causes, but it was actually an assassination, or maybe just died of natural causes, whatever the case may be. We're focusing so much on her mom, we haven't really dived into her dad's, we dive into the family a little bit, but I'll get to that soon enough. But obviously it's like, Hap takes her to meet the generals and everything, and other people, and they have their particular plans of like, they want her to take over the throne and everything. But obviously for her, it's like, it's like, oh, were you planning on living the life of a scrapper your entire life? But for her, it's like she probably wasn't thinking that far ahead, because for her in her line of work, you know, survival is a day by day basis. You probably don't think too much of like, oh, where am I going to be and what am I going to do 5 years from now? It's like, no, like, where's my next job coming from? Like, where's my next meal? You live meal to meal type of situation. You survive. So it's like, for her, she has no, because she never wanted the throne, but now it's like so many people depend on it, because it's like, because I can understand too, it's like, why would you want the throne considering the fact it so much relies on you? It's like, because she says like, oh, we're going to try and say that the revolt was my fault, and half was like, no, no one's thinking that. But I think on some level maybe she was. She's like, maybe if I was a little older, if I was wiser, maybe I could have done something differently, and maybe I could have, you know, changed things. And sadly, like, but whatever the case may be, like that, sadly, that general kind of shame service, like, your mother would be so disappointed right now. It's like, that's such a low blow, making her feel guilty about it, because it's like so many people rely on you as queen. Like, you might not want it, but the fact is, the duty of a queen is to put other people's lives before their own. So it's like, oh, look at you being selfish. It's like, you can make that argument, but it's like, I mean, to be fair, it's understandable why you'd be scared. You were a little kid. People want you dead. You thought your mom was dead. So like, so much of your life was literally turned upside down. Especially for her, it's like, I literally went at this alone for so many years, but it's like, yeah, you're here now having the army and everything, but you weren't there with me when I had to do whatever it takes to survive when I was on my own. Like, that was kind of the thing, because she's been on her own for the past like 8 years. She's been kind of surviving on her own, because it was like, yeah, it was like 8 years ago when the whole thing went down and she got separated from her mom. So it's like she's been on the run, hiding on her own, not realizing there were loyalists out there still working. They were trying to track her down and everything, but still. So it's like, not like they did the best bang up job with the whole situation. But they had their plans on how they were going to infiltrate Republic space, and they were like, oh, like, we can blow up this station. I even love that dude being like, oh, we could, you know, pretend to be dead bodies and stuff like that. He's like, oh my god, that's such a good idea. And everyone else is looking at him like he's stupid. He's like, no, I'm just, you know, throwing it out there. But obviously for Aleda, it's like, that's not a smart move, because all you're going to do is attract the Republic. But for them, it's like, we've got the numbers, we've been ready for this war, but it's like, why put yourself in a position? Because for her, it's like, also like, we're risking the opportunity to save my mom. My mom's life could be, you know, be threatened because of this whole situation. So why would we go about it that way? So, but literally, she goes with that and ends up meeting up with a buddy of hers named Clive. He's a frog dude. And it's like, oh, you owe me that favor, so let's get this done. Also love the dudes that took him. It's like, oh, look at these slimy trespassers. And I love happening like, did he just call us slimy? And it's like, yeah, pretty gnarly. And I love that they're like on a communication, and the general's like, oh, this isn't, and you know, Aleda was like, I don't care, it's my idea, we're gonna do this, is my mother, we're gonna save her, and we're gonna do it my way. And home dude burps, and she's like, nice. And just, once again, she's not a queen. She even said it herself. She's like, everyone looks at her. She was talking to May about it, like, oh, they look at me and they see a queen, but that's not who she sees. She doesn't see herself the way these people, because they look at her as like their last hope, their queen and everything, you know. And for her, she just doesn't see that. Like, she's in this to save her mom, and beyond that, you know, her mom's going to probably have a lot to say about, like, you know, like, no, you need to pick up the throne and everything again, because it's too important. So many people's lives rest on it, like, you know, because you can bring back order and, you know, so much. But what's interesting is we end up learning in a flashback that basically we learn a little bit more about her family's history. That basically, like, there was someone a millennia ago who kind of ended a war using something known as Sterzard. Basically, it's this power that basically came from like a dying star or something. Basically, it gives you control over people's minds. So it's a giant mind control ability. But eventually, like, people around that era, like, upon, like, you know, war was ended and councils were kind of created, but like so many people who used the ability got corrupted. So Aleda's family kind of hid it away. So it's like, and there we go. Because I was wondering, like, it didn't seem like it was just a bloodline thing of like why this monarchy is the way it is. I figured it was not just a political thing, but I figured it had to have like some special, like, only their bloodline can do something. So it must be like only their bloodline has access to where the Serza is being hidden. That only their bloodline can open it. So she's literally the only person in this galaxy, just in general, who can open a way. And because it turns out, because Isaac ends up overhearing that's what this has all been about. It's never been about like, oh, we're going to infiltrate and save your mom. It's like, no, they happen to go by like Aleda's plan now, but it's like, oh, this was your idea, and he's like, it's a smart play, but it's like, it's about getting that device. So she's thinking they're going there to save her mom. Well, they have ulterior motives. Their motives have always been ulterior because they want her to take that power and, kind of have which that power was taken away because it's too much for any person to handle. But for them, it's like, oh, like, but then again, it could be a thing of like, I don't think it's a thing of like, if you're from a certain bloodline, you can handle it. Probably anyone can utilize it. Aleda's just she's the key to getting it. It's what that all comes down to, I think, interestingly enough. But it's going to be interesting to, find, it's interesting because obviously Isaac doesn't think much of it. He just walks by like, okay. He doesn't think much of it because he doesn't know what we as the audience know. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing of like knowing that they have ulterior motives. But I guess at the end of the day, it's like Aleda's getting her mom, so who cares about the finer details? But it's like, well, they came there with their own mission, so getting the Aleda's mom not really top priority because because even she would agree like you being on the throne, that's what's more important. I'm sure she wouldn't sign off on these plans they have of using this Arizona because it's like it's not the best option because that's too much power for anyone to handle because eventually, absolute power corrupts absolutely type of situation. So at the same time, she's talking to like, Amay and everything. And then like, Amay sees that other lady and I'm like, oh, that sucks. Because I think Amay doesn't realize how Aleda feels about her. Aleda's not really good, I think, talking about her feelings in that regard. So she doesn't realize it. And you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. But nevertheless, obviously, Home Dude ends up betraying them. He goes to Lazaro to tell them exactly where Aleda is. And I love the fact is that he's like, just like a slimy, like he look slimy before. Now in this light, it's like, oh, he looks even slimier because his whole coat is in and he's constantly touching his coat and he's just like sticking. He's like, he looks like he's covered in snot. And the fact is at one point, like, something on his face busts and it like green goo falls over Lazaro's face and it's like, oh, you can tell he's not amused. Even when he gets the information, he's most likely going to kill you after this just because you discuss. Just to get the information out of you, he'd probably torture you just for the added bonus, but whatever the case may be. I do love that they have the whole I love that it's like, oh, we have to bring these idiots with us, and those three are looking sad, and then like Isaac's like, you're all right, Carl. And Carl's like, oh, thank you. I'm like, I love that Carl's the only one who gets the compliment. I love the whole thing of like, yeah, have had to be like, yeah, there's also like compromises that had to be made because it's like, yeah, if you kind of get in our way or whatever, we get to shoot you. And he's like, yeah, like I said, compromises had to be made. But also, so very interesting setup, obviously getting ready for the rescue mission, which once again, the loyalists, I mean, granted, we know that Half and the General came up with that, like those higher ranker people. We don't know if the other loyalists that are with them, like the other two and Garl, like we don't know if they know what's going on. Maybe, maybe not. I doubt it because I think they're probably all in this for Aleda, not realizing that there's another step to this whole situation. Like I said, I think Aleda probably is like what they want her to rule as queen, but also had that power. But it's also going to be a thing of like, because apparently like the general's been the one kind of planning on how to kind of rebuild everything. So she could decide to kind of like, be like, oh, I'm going to be your advisor. I'm going to point you in the right direction. Basically, I'll be the hand that guides the sword that is you type of situation. Or maybe it's like, well, Aleda wants to have nothing to do with it. I'll be the one to kind of, it could be something like that. We'll see. I would assume it'd be the former just because I feel like they are so loyal to the throne and the crown. But, we'll see. It'd be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.